Well, a very good morning to you and welcome to Talking Point here on WESN, the content capital. My name is Keaton Shaw. It is the 31st of March 2022 and it is also the day that 19,198 primary school students will be sitting the secondary entrance assessment. The exam will begin shortly and this morning we send out all our best wishes. Good luck to you if you're writing the exam this morning. And as we mentioned on Tuesday, always remember you have the ability, always envision that in your mind and always feel confident knowing that you've gotten this far. You've done your very best in terms of preparations. Now go out there and get the job done. All the best to you and good luck to students writing the exam this morning. Alongside me this morning is my co-host colleague, my good friend, Mr. Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Keaton. And yes, I want to share your best wishes for all of the SEA students, but also to tell them that this is but the first step or the second step. The point is, it's not over after this. This is not the be-all and end-all for you. I think it's something that parents also need to remember because, yes, while I know many a successful person that went to a good school, their first choice, etc., I also know many people who were successful despite the fact that they didn't necessarily get into the school of their choice for a variety of reasons, not just because of their academic ability, but circumstances might have affected their performance. The point is, they were able to then, at another stage of their education and their life, further their development and be a success. So this is, again, one step. Don't stress out about it, and parents, more importantly, because it's at this point, the kids, they're as prepared as they can be. It's parents, don't stress out about it, even when you get the results later on.
I think the message that you have pushed there can be utilized in many circumstances for any individual, even separate to the conversation of SEA this morning, and that is in any moment, any given moment, any situation or circumstance that you may face, there is always opportunity and you have to be willing to look for that opportunity and work hard for that opportunity. No matter what you may face, you can always come out of it. It all depends on your mindset and how much you're willing to work towards it. But as we mentioned, let's not get too much into the philosophy about it. At the end of the day, we're here, you're here. Have a great day as you sit your exam. And all the very best to you. Anyway, folks, we're in a bit of a happy mood this morning, not because yesterday we were able to have some rest. That's always welcomed in the middle of the week. But it's actually because we do have good news to share with you this morning. Regardless of what you may think, let's not try to politicize it too much. Let's actually accept the fact that there is good news. And let's start off with Caribbean Airlines this morning because the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Brian Manning, has indicated that Caribbean Airlines will increase flights from 16 daily of the air bridge, that is between Trinidad and Tobago, and it's going to increase by 8 flights. So we'll now be seeing about 24 flights daily, at least for the Easter period. Whether or not this will continue afterwards, we will see, simply because we're not entirely sure of the numbers of travelers after peak periods, but it'll be interesting. But I still believe that though it is just 2 weeks before Easter, it's still some good news. It is good news, and we must accept that something was actually done about it, at least before having to make the decision last minute to put a flight at 11 o'clock in the night, Sean, using the jet.
Well, right. So using a jet is usually a loss-making exercise because at those points in time, the traffic is very heavy one way. So that's the unfortunate thing with peak period traffic like Easter vacation, August vacations, parts of July, Christmas, not necessarily December, but Christmas itself and all years. And the jet alone is probably not going to make a profit, even if it has passengers both ways. But those peak periods, those emergency situations, it's basically one way they're getting money and one way they're basically empty. I'm more concerned about the everyday, week to week, what the amount of flights would be like. They say 16 to 24, so is that 12 in each direction? Or because I don't believe 24 would be a high number if that was literally the round trips being counted. Mm-hmm. So what will it be after Easter? Because Tobago needs to get back to a sense of normalcy, I guess. The flip side, of course, is you can't necessarily just flip the switch, say, hey, we'll do a normal amount of flights and expect that you'll have the automatic demand for it. Because people on disposable income right now is not necessarily in large supply. So while we're not traveling and partaking in a lot of things, it's not that people will be ready to jump at the hat. Yes, I know there's some of you who are looking to do that, but is it the same amount that we would have had before?
Well, I think, first of all, if I'm not mistaken, there are 16 daily flights between Trinidad and Tobago, which actually translates to 8 return flights. So that means 24 daily flights, I would assume, will mean 12 return flights. That being said, currently with what we're experiencing here in Trinidad and Tobago, I must admit that generally a lot of people, at least many of whom I've spoken to, are really looking at all options, including whether or not we're going to stay at a hotel, stay to get away, as they say here in Trinidad and Tobago. Or many people as well have expressed a desire to go to Tobago. In our conversations on Tuesday, we emphasized the fact that the flights, there weren't enough flights, but the amount of hotel rooms that were available on the island for the Easter period was tremendous. There were a lot of empty rooms. It was very easy to get a hotel room for the coming Easter vacation. Now that this announcement has been made, within the next couple of days, I think, I'm not entirely sure. I actually have not gone on Caribbean Airlines website as yet to see if the flights have been sold out, or whether or not at least the flights have been placed on the website for booking. But I also think this will certainly be good news generally for local tourism on the island. And I think hotel rooms will certainly benefit from this announcement.
I will just like to caution people, as much as they probably were empty rooms, hotels do need to figure out a way to ramp up their operations, especially industry, which is primarily small businesses. This is not a Hilton and a Marriott and a whole set of international chains that have large coffers that could be able to just get the cash to ramp back up operations. So I know in some cases it's not going to be so easy. The availability of rooms might not be what you would expect it to be from yesteryear, even though there will be empty rooms now. So if you really want to go to Tobago and you haven't made that decision yet, you need to do it as soon as possible. With that said, one of the things that I don't know if you could correct me, is the Airbridge operating at full capacity, or do we still have to have stagger? I know that for flights we've seen or we've heard of more or less full capacity, so I assume the planes will be full.
Well, yes, the planes are full, and they have been full for the most part. I mean, as you mentioned, peak period is one thing. It's extremely difficult to get a seat on a flight, even via standby. Each flight can actually hold about 68 passengers. And those flights generally have been full. Off-peak periods, it's obviously more easy to get a seat on a flight. We haven't seen them as full as before, and this is why I'm saying it'll be interesting to see the trends after Easter, whether or not we go back to those 8 return flights daily, or whether we remain at 12 return flights daily.
The other problem, of course, would be with price of fuel going up so high, given the price of oil right now. You know, what will it be like for Caribbean Airlines operating in this environment? Because the last time the price of oil was high, the country was relatively rich enough that I'm sure they were able to absorb that increased cost. You know, I mean, the government generally has a history of bailing out entities, so I'm sure there was some bailing out of Caribbean Airlines, because back in those days, the profitability of the airline was, you know, at times questionable. So what's going to happen now?
On that particular point, there is some good news in relation to the oil and gas sector as well. We'll get into that shortly. But interestingly enough, as you mentioned the subsidy, something that really piqued my curiosity in relation to that is generally the subsidy has been kept at a certain dollar, right? In my opinion, at least, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's not been a percentage, it's actually been to the dollar. And what we fail to realize, and I think this is where it goes back into management, is that the price as well as the production of oil and gas tends to fluctuate. So, because it tends to fluctuate, Sean, do you believe that the subsidy, at least the cost of a ticket, should fluctuate as well? Not in terms of we're putting on the full price of the actual ticket, but the subsidy on the ticket should fluctuate in terms of the percentage in relation to the fluctuations in oil and gas production and price.
Only if the air bridge ticket generally will fluctuate. So the subsidy itself should not necessarily be the mechanism, I don't think, right? If you want things to fluctuate or to move as the price of oil moves, so I guess technically the answer is no. I think the fluctuation should come from another source.
On the price of the ticket, as we see with other airlines during other periods.
But with that said, there's also the question of should we potentially, because ideally you don't want to have so many people on standby that you could fill another plane, right? But the flip side is, it's not as though you're going to have the system perfect. You're going to get some people on standby. You don't want to have empty planes then in order to ensure that there is no standby wait. You don't want to have so many flights where most of your flights are half full. So usually international carriers, and I haven't necessarily checked, but I assume Carl does this as well. This is a reasonable assumption. For most flights, they will fluctuate the price based on the route, based on the time you book, on a host of other factors. And I think at the very least, the time that people book, if you book early or well in advance, sure, $300 a seat. Keep the subsidy then, if you want to keep it down to $300. If you want a last minute ticket, particularly for a peak holiday period, then why not raise the price by 100 or 200? Because again, to meet some of this demand, Caribbean Airlines has had to absorb losses because all of this extra demand means one-way traffic. And when you put a 737 one way, you're already making losses on the flight even if it was full both ways. But half of the trip, the start of the weekend or the start of the holiday period, the planes are full going to Tobago and empty coming back, and vice versa.
It goes back to the basic economic principle of demand and supply.
Well, the unfortunate thing is, and we've seen this with the port, we've seen this with public utilities, we've seen this with telecommunications, particularly when it was a monopoly, even though we probably didn't necessarily see it. Social considerations at times, this is what happens when the government is an owner. Social considerations trump profitability or even just operational viability, right? Because profits can go to losses just like that, as we've seen in the pandemic, and a lot of small business owners know. So the Caribbean Airlines, the subsidy, how the air bridge is operated is not a profit-making venture. It's operated as a social good, as a service, right? The only reason why, of course, you have to charge a ticket price is the government literally cannot pay fully for the service. Same thing with the ferry. It's kept low in order for people with little disposable income that need to travel between the islands for non-pleasure reasons to be able to afford it. Pensioners, of course, go on the boat for free, etc. But the flip side is, I think the situation is not necessarily kept at a good enough balance. So again, peak period for Easter. We're trying to get a lot of people there. The hotels make some money. That's nice. But if we're losing too much money on the airline side, and they started making adjustments to this with the change fee, which I think was very late in coming.
$50 one way actually to change.
Right, but the point is, if you don't change your booking, you don't have to pay the $50. But I think a variable price, and yes, I get a lot of people complain, but this is an airline we're talking about.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think a variable price is something that needs to be examined. I'm also considering the boat in relation to the inter-island ferry service as well. If whether or not a price varying, I don't think price variables matter there simply because it's just between both islands. But in terms of the maintenance and management of the ferry service, I mean, if the government were to increase the price, again, it's subsidized, but if it were to increase the price simply based off of demand and supply, would we also see that translating into better maintenance of the boat? Would the government then have any excuses in relation to we don't have funds, you know?
The main problem with maintenance of the boat is not necessarily the funds, it's the time. So they used to take, when we just had the Express and the Spirit, I can't speak directly now because I haven't taken the ferry for a while, but when we used to have just the Express and the Spirit back around 2011 to 2014 or so, I used to take the boat very regularly. 3 months at a time, one would be taken off. And generally speaking, for peak periods, you'll be looking at 4 trips for both boats, especially when only one boat is operating, because you need those 4 trips in order to have 2 legs each. There's wear and tear on the boats, it accumulates, it adds up. Of course, there's going to be depreciation and just, over time, the boat getting older, it's going to take more work to keep it running. But the real thing is, on a yearly basis, it seems as though there's too much effort being expended on these boats, or the boats themselves are being used a bit too much, and they don't have the time to do all the maintenance work, especially as the boat gets older.
Many aspects to the maintenance. One could be funding, one could be the expertise in order to keep this.
Funding could be it too, because from what I understand, there was a point in time where the contract was shifted to a different maintenance provider, and the quality was affected as a result, as a cost-saving measure. Now, the other thing is capital expenditure. I will say this: if anybody has specific, detailed criticisms of the idea, I'm all for hearing it. But the idea to have a stopover, I call it a stopover, but the port in Turku, because I don't think it's going to be the Anchorage, the port of Anchorage, but a port in Turku where you essentially tell people, listen, for a certain amount of trips, it's only an hour to an hour and a half travel. You drive there, you load your car there, we go straight there. It saves wear and tear on the boat, it makes your trip shorter, it saves fuel costs. I thought that was a brilliant idea. Of course, you still have to invest the money to build such a facility, or making sure that you always have 3 ferries.
You see, my concern is not the fact that it's a good idea, and I must make another point in relation to its rooms shortly, but I don't think it's a bad idea, and I've never been against the idea. What I've been against is simply because of history. I have concerns in relation to the implementation, the investment. I mean, what is it going to cost? Are we going to take a loan and all that surrounding it? But also, my main concern for that is management, because it's very difficult at this point in time to sustain the inter-island ferry service. And I use that term not loosely, but again, just based off of history. I mean, there was a report, a cabinet subcommittee report into the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, of which we never got. There have been so many issues associated with the Port Authority and the inter-island ferry service. And my concern is, we have a great idea, we have a plan, and we want to get this done. But at the end of the day, what is the cost, not only to the consumer, but to the population on a whole?
So I guess the key thing is, I could see the pros, whether the pros outweigh the cons, or the pros are enough that the costs of it are less than the cost of how we're operating currently. So yes, it depends a lot on specific implementation details. I myself am not calling for a full-on port with full-on facilities. It's just a dock for the ferry in order to cut down the ferry's travel time and operational time. And if I was a driver, and even when it's in Port of Spain, I find, yes, you have to get here earlier with your car and all that, but in a lot of ways, it's a lot more convenient to be a driving passenger as opposed to a walk-on passenger. I've done both multiple times. So if I could drive for an hour to an hour and a half to then only actually spend an hour on sea, of course the loading and unloading will add more time. But the actual travel time on the boat is cut. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Not everybody will go for that, but then you could still have trips to Port of Spain. So a bare bones facility might be easier to build and maintain than trying to keep replacing ferries that have high operational tempo and higher maintenance costs.
I only see one flaw in your theory, my friend.
Which is?
It's too idealistic. But as you said, and in all fairness, you said we have to weigh the pros and cons. And if the pros outweigh the cons, then fair enough.
I think ultimately speaking, this is one area where we can't just assume, well, the way that we're doing it right now is the best way, because again, we can't afford excesses like we used to. and we need money for other projects as well. But we can't stop the ferry service. Too many people rely on it. And as long as we have the ferry service, then we could be a little bit more normalized with our pricing structure with the air bridge.
Let's now move on to another topic. Some more good news, actually, because it again, we've always spoken about Carnival and whether or not...
I feel like I poo-pooed on your good news for most of the segment already.
No. As I said, again, we have to be fair. We're not politicizing the issue too much. We are looking at the fact that it is good news indeed. I mean, even the Chief Secretary of the THA has expressed his delight and satisfaction over this. But some more good news. The demand for hotel rooms for Carnival 2023 has exceeded expectations. One hotel, for example, the Hyatt Regency, opened bookings on Ash Wednesday of this year, and they were sold out within 24 hours. We look at another hotel within Port of Spain, Cape Rock Hotel. They are yet to implement their rates, but they have a list of people on standby.
I feel like I'm going to be poo-pooing your good news.
No. Listen, I'm simply stating that we see the demand is there.
Yes.
Whether or not that is actually international tourists or local tourists, we can have that discussion later on. The mere fact is the demand is there. Hotels and smaller hotels have already expressed that they have bookings in place. They have not fixed rates as yet, and they have not actually planned it out. Many of them saying give us until April, but they have calls of people on waiting list and on standby. It goes back to the conversation of whether or not Carnival has been profitable, whether or not we've made a profit from Carnival. But I think it's good news, and I hope, again, I've used this word a lot this morning, it translates into even more good news. So Carnival 2023, again, we're not too sure what is going to happen. The WHO has indicated that COVID-19 deaths worldwide have soared, but cases have dropped.
Yeah.
Right? And overall, when you think about it and you put that into perspective, that is fair news. But in relation to Carnival next year, we don't know what's going to happen, but thus far it seems as though the announcement of the dates for next year has put in place the sale or the quick sale of hotel rooms.
So there's a lot of catch-22s here, and I'll try and be quick because we're running out of time. First of all, with regards to COVID and will COVID end, I think death rate soaring is bad, but the infection rate dropping, this is just my layman's understanding, the infection rate dropping means the odds of a new variant is probably reduced. So that could be a good sign, right? However, one of the things we have to look out for is China. It seems as though things are not looking good there. And ironically, where it started, I very much hope this does not happen, it might be restarted. But with that said, the real thing with Carnival...
Very careful what you say.
I know. The real thing with Carnival tourism is it's not year-round. Now, with regards to Carnival itself, I think a lot of our private entertainment industry, this is good news. Carnival, that side of Carnival is profitable. We know this because private businessmen are not about to put on events and do functions for a loss. So this going forward is a good news for our Carnival season next year, for our entertainment industry moving forward. And it's one of the main things that drives Carnival. Unfortunately, we do have to ask, what about a lot of the other traditional aspects of mass? What about the NCC, etc., etc.? We have talked about that the last Carnival season. I'll leave that there. Tourism now. Minister of Tourism is also the Minister of Culture. This is but one aspect of both tourism and culture that cannot sustain the country's tourism and culture year-round. Yes, I know there's going to be Carnival in October, but here's the problem with that. That will be new. That will be new, and by an unproven body to try to conduct these sort of things. How old is Miami Carnival? How old is Carnival in Notting Hill? Old enough?
I must express...
Old enough?
I must express that my co-host and colleague was absolutely honest and clear when he said he will be poo-pooing on my good news this morning.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, the issues associated with the NCC, the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, that's not going to change overnight. I'm just saying the private sector seems to be benefiting from the announcement.
The thing is, and I have bad talk the man, but to be fair, Randall Mitchell is probably operating with a budget that is a fraction or even a fraction of what he probably wishes he had with regards to tourism. But I do not necessarily have any confidence or at least I have no reason to have confidence in the various bodies outside of maybe the new direction for the THA's division for tourism, because I think they see the need. They're not attached to central government. They might see the need to get a little bit more independence in Tobago's economy, but more importantly, to have the private sector be more robust for job creation. Fine. But ultimately, with tourism, you know, whatever the names of the companies are, I don't even know, I can't even remember what the names of the companies are, you know. Now, can Mr. Mitchell, Minister Mitchell, turn it around, leave his mark? On one hand, it doesn't take much to leave your mark on tourism in the country. On the other hand, he might not even have the resources to do that, to be fair.
Certainly poo-pooed on my...
but all in all,
good news. But
it's good news. Both points are good news. We should be happy for it, because at the very least, it's normalcy. It points us to direction of normalcy. And I would advise people, take a staycation. Whether in Trinidad or Tobago, take a staycation. Be careful with traveling.
Now, in relation to that, the troubles associated with the National Carnival Commission, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, is not going to go away overnight. But as I said, the mere fact that there was an announcement which then translated into injection into the private sector, already we're seeing that, it's good news. Now, this is what I'm saying. There's always opportunity, and I hope that the government, and by extension the NCC and the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, see this and read the same article that we're reading and look at opportunities for next year. We have a year to plan for this. This year we had a taste of Carnival. And I honestly, though people enjoyed it and though it may have given opportunity to some individuals to earn some income, I still think that it was unnecessary, the expense. But that is old news. We're focusing on next year. We have a year to plan. Is anything going to be different? I highly doubt. But that doesn't mean it's going to take away my hope for hopefully seeing a better experience, the mother of all carnivals, and hopefully, fingers crossed, some profit. You spoke about tourism. Have you visited the website visittrinidad.tt?
Well, since I live in Trinidad, no, I haven't had a reason to visit that website.
Whether or not you live in Trinidad, it'll be a good idea to visit it. Now, this was a website that was launched last year by the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and the Culture. And you have not
the timing is impeccable.
You have not heard many individuals actually speak about this website since it was launched. Initially, it was a very good initiative. But then, and even the website itself, the layout of the website, what the website entails, it's excellent, it's great. But we can create all these ideas and put them into fruition. At the end of the day, if we do not market it, then it does not make any sense whatsoever. I mean, we spend money on this, but we have not marketed it. And it's a brilliant website. It really is.
Part of the problem. And just making a website is not necessarily going to help you, because they need to know to look for it. See, if they look for Caribbean destination, how many other islands and other islands websites are going to come up before ours? And I think the main thing is, and either Chris James or somebody else from the Tobago Hotel Association brought up the fact that it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars because you're starting almost from scratch. Right? And we just had a gold medal winner. And one of the things that pains me is when I see our sportsmen do so well and medal on the world stage, I do have to wonder, everybody knows Usain Bolt is from Jamaica. They know what Jamaica is, right? How many people around the world are asking, I thought Trinidad and Tobago was in Jamaica? Because that's a question I have heard multiple times when I used to travel when I was in my younger days.
I mean, the one thing I've heard is that I heard Port of Spain was in Europe. And that,
but I mean, do people even know who we are when they see our red, white, and black on the medal podium, where we're from?
I think
outside of the diaspora.
I must be fair. I think people will recognize the Trinidad and Tobago flag. For whatever reason, I think people
You're assuming they know who we are to begin with. Recognizing the flag is not a problem. But recognizing where we are, how many foreigners think we might be a country in Africa? How many of the foreigners think we might be a country somewhere else? You know, because our tourism product is not really getting any traction. Meanwhile, I'm sure Jamaica gets a lot of traction from Bob Marley, from Usain Bolt, and the like. But what about us?
Well,
Where's our cricket fans for Brian
goes
Lara?
back to my original argument in relation to marketing. I always will refer to the examples of the radio stations in the United Kingdom, and even what you see during cricket matches, international cricket matches between the West Indies and another team, where you see Visit Barbados or St. Vincent and the Grenadines or St. Lucia advertisements. We don't see that for Trinidad and Tobago. But again, I point out, if
we have celebrities from American TV, which are more or less internationally known, who have connections to Trinidad. What about them?
If you have the opportunity, please go to the website, visit trinidad.tt. It's brilliant, it's beautiful, well done. But that's just where the well done ends, because we have not marketed it. We've spent money on it. I don't know how much, no exact figure was ever given, a ballpark figure was given, but we've never actually marketed it, and it doesn't make any sense. But on that website, you can plan your trip. You get 360 virtual tours. You get TripAdvisor updates. You get criticisms and critiques of destinations within the island itself. And it's absolutely brilliant. But, again, as pointed out by Sean, that is not...
You want to know what's the most
ends.
sickening thing? You want to know what's the most sickening thing? When they hear the steel ban, I am sure the majority of people do not associate the steel ban as originating from Trinidad and Tobago.
Sean, they do not.
They do not.
They do not. I mean,
Something as iconic as that.
You can take a look at television now, Western television now, and the entire thing about the steel pan is, yes, it's from the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago is from the Caribbean, but it's not associated directly with Trinidad and Tobago. It's associated with the Caribbean, and often it's associated with, funny enough, Jamaica.
Ask people where Bob Marley is from, they'll tell you.
You know, so it's all that is not news to us. But regardless, when we raise the issue, it's still very frustrating. Anyway, we've been talking for the last half an hour.
We've gone way over time on this.
I think that we deserve to take a break here on the program, and I think you deserve to get just a bit of a minute's rest for your ears from Sean and I own voices this morning.
From you. I don't know.
When we return, we will continue the conversations, and then later on in the program, we will welcome our guest commentator this morning. Stay tuned to Talking Point here on WESN, the Content Capital.
Change your fate! Start to win at life with $20,000 every month. Win $20,000 every month for 20 years with NLCB's newest game, Win for Life. 6 numbers from 28 plus the cash ball could make you win for life. You deserve a win. Play Win for Life today. Visit NLCBGames.com for details. Players must be 18 years and over. Please play responsibly.
Say hello to the newest way to access eye care support. Say hello to Ferrera Optical Virtual Care. For the first time in TNT, you can now connect from the convenience of your home with our team of eye care professionals online. Need guidance in a vision problem or adapting to new eyewear? Book a virtual visit via FerreraOptical.com using our smart scheduler, and we'll take care of the rest. Ferrera Optical Virtual Care, connecting with you wherever you are.
Gift giving during a lockdown can still be hassle-free with a gift from FanZone with delivery options available nationwide. Visit and browse our Facebook and Instagram pages for all your official licensed merchandise and apparel, and have it delivered to your door. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. FanZone, we've got you covered.
The best birthday gifts are at thebesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
If you live with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 and has to self-isolate at home, take care of them from a distance and reduce their movement around the house. Give them space, a designated space, and open those windows. If you have to be in contact, mask up, both of you. If you work, stay home from work and don't go out, not even to the grocery or pharmacy. And remember, no visitors allowed. Limit the contact to limit the spread.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to Talking Points here on WESN. Now, we do not have much time before our guest commentator is due to join us on the program, but we will share with you some more good news, or at least I will share with you some more good news, and my co-host and colleague will do a very good job at poo-pooing on it again, as he so fondly stated earlier. Now, this now goes into the oil and gas sector, because Trinidad and Tobago's gas sector specifically has seen an increase in production from November till January this year. Figures from February till now have not officially been released. But according to documents from within the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, we've seen an increase by about 23% in the production of gas. And this is due to Shell. And we're seeing that translates to roughly about 1,500 barrels a day. This has in turn also impacted positively on the production of methanol, ammonia, and urea, which are byproducts of the natural gas production. Sean, it's attributed mostly to the performance of Royal Dutch Shell. Now, just to add to the perspective of this in relation to BPTT, they informed the government that production will be lower than expected when compared to years before, which is not news to us. The news, however, states that production has actually been lower than initially anticipated and is lower than what they informed the government of. However, Royal Dutch Shell has seen some improvement, which is great in terms of 23%. And it could not have come at a better time, at least you could argue. Now, take that with a pinch of salt. That's in relation to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Yeah. Simply
because we're not for the war. But the war has impacted upon oil and gas markets globally.
The question is, why? Because we needed natural gas last year. Why is the production increased because Shell could invest more money to increase production because the price has increased, so their operational costs are improved? Is it because they found more supply? It would really be helpful if we knew exactly why. However, with that said, this is good for two reasons. One, yes, it helps us get, more revenue, more gas is flowing, etc. From what I understand, we are selling gas to Europe as part of the efforts to make up for the how should I put this? The situation with supply coming out of Eastern Europe, Russia, etc.
Well,
so
just to
now I don't think we've replaced.
Germany has actually started putting measures in place for gas rationing.
Right.
So bear that in mind as well.
Now, apparently they have not completely cut off buying natural gas, at least not all European countries, including, I think, Germany. I could be wrong. Natural gas from Russia. But there's major attempts being made to sever that dependency. And by our gas production being increased, it's one more source, not necessarily going to solve all of the problems, but it's one more source helping to add back to the supply to try to keep costs down. We don't actually want costs to get too high and then, inflation just gets out of control.
Well, adding to that very quickly, just before our commentator joins us, we also have to bear in mind that the utilization rate, as you pointed out, of gas has also increased. So, as I said, it's good that our production has increased because it's able to meet the supply, is now able to meet the demand, at least for natural gas coming out of Trinidad and Tobago. But also, oil production has also increased, and with oil being levied at about $100 per barrel since this invasion of Ukraine began, it's also good news for Trinidad and Tobago. Again, I'm trying to be as best as possible in describing it because I don't want to be disrespectful or in any way make any sort of offensive remarks or comments about the war, but we have to bear in mind that, again, it has effects on the global market. So oil production increasing also is a benefit to Trinidad and Tobago at this time.
No, it's increasing, but let's be clear. It's not as though it's increased by half or doubled or anything like that. But it has increased, and in some ways, that's a good sign. We have a little bit more than we expected. We have a bit more of a buffer. Great. If it actually increased too much, I think that could potentially cause more problems than it would solve. But that's a whole other discussion that we don't have time for.
We do it. Okay, what we're going to do very quickly, again, we're going to take a break here on the program just to welcome our guest commentator, Senator Jayanthy Lakshminiyal. Bear with us. We'll be right back after this.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Thank you for staying with us this morning here on Talking Points. And now joining us via Zoom is Opposition Senator Jayanthy Lakshminiyal. Good morning, Senator Lakshminiyal. Welcome to Talking Point.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
We're doing well. How are you doing?
Morning.
Hope you were rested over the holiday yesterday.
Yeah, I had a really nice beach day, so it was good.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, you went to the beach for both Sean and I. We couldn't make it. We were too... Well, let's just say we enjoyed spending time in our respective beds. But Senator, let's get immediately into the conversation. Just starting off very briefly, just wanted to explore the topic. The opposition leader said that Trinidad and Tobago has become a non-player within CARICOM and amongst world leaders worldwide under the Prime Ministership of Dr. Keith Rowley. Do you think that those comments are unfair, or do you tend to agree with the opposition leader stating that we've become a non-player and world leaders no longer take us seriously?
Well, look, as you know, I am not one to say things lightly, and I would say that to arrive at the conclusion as to whether or not they do take us seriously or not, one simply has to look at the history. I think from the beginning of this term of this government under Rowley, which was, they came into office at a time when they boasted about their management of COVID. When I say they started the second term, they campaigned on their excellent management of COVID. And I think that the day they won election was the last day they were able to do that, because thereafter things really, went to hell in a handbasket quickly thereafter. And let us examine the history of what took place. Let us look at, for example, the issue of the acquisition of free vaccines through India's vaccine diplomacy program. Let us look at CARICOM as a bloc negotiating for vaccines at the time when the Caribbean needed it, and Keith Rowley was actually the head of CARICOM. Trinidad and Tobago was in the chair at the time. You saw at the time the incoming chair, the Prime Minister of Antigua, basically working with Mia Mottley and others to take lead in some of these things. You see now that other Caribbean leaders are making comments about Trinidad and Tobago, whether we agree with them, in total or not. We have to see, there must be a reason why people are saying these things. There must be some sort of perception out there. Whether the perception is correct or not, and whether it's up to us to correct that perception. Are we doing that? We had major energy conferences being held in countries which are very close to us for various reasons, not just geographically, but culturally and otherwise, which is Guyana. One tends to believe that some of the comments that Prime Minister Rowley made about the Guyanese election, when you recall that they had a lot of drama, so to speak, surrounding their election, and some of the comments that he made, even when the opposition leader here had asked for recounts, he alluded to the fact that she was trying to Guyanese the election or something like that. He has quite simply laid the foundation, I think, for a negative image for Trinidad and Tobago. And I think he has strained the relations between us and several countries which have previously had and enjoyed very close relations to us. I think that the manner in which other leaders have stepped up also, sometimes it's not so much what you do or don't do, but what others are doing that tends to overshadow you. So whereas in the past, Trinidad and Tobago emerged or was always out front as a leader, we are seeing others sort of not even just catching up, but surpassing us. And I make no apology for saying I think Mia Mottley has become a regional and international star in some respects in terms of being a spokesperson and showing leadership within the Caribbean. And because of that as well, I think that affects our positioning with respect to in the Caribbean and with the rest of the world.
I share the sentiments expressed in relation to the Bajan Prime Minister Mia Mottley actually becoming an international star and admired by many. But are we now getting here within Trinidad and Tobago locally? Are we now actually trying to milk a situation or create and deepen a diplomatic situation that may not actually exist? Yes, I agree that the Prime Minister's comments in Parliament last week was not necessary. It wasn't needed. And his comments, though, on Saturday in relation to responding to questions about Guyana was fair. He went on to speak about opposition MP Rodney Charles. But we here in Trinidad and Tobago, are we now mincing this? Are we thinking too much and making too much of a situation that may not actually exist?
Well, as I said, everyone judges. No one knows. That's the thing about diplomacy. You don't know about the conversations that happen behind closed doors. You don't know about the conversations that happen at that level of international relations, then, so to speak. I found that Amory Brown's response to the Vice President of Guyana was a bit weak, and I don't even felt like we could have been properly defended. And even if we could have been better defended, I don't know that he really made the effort to. Are we contributing to it? People will judge this based on their own experiences. I, for example, as you know, I am from South Trinidad, and South Trinidad is populated by, energy service providers, companies that started off by small businesses and grew because of our energy sector and started to do business with all the big players, the Shells, the BPs, BHPs, etc. And all I can hear from people around me, those are the people I grew up with, I socialize with, my neighbors, etc., is that Guyana is a place to be, and that's where they want to go and they want to get opportunities. And people are disgruntled, very disgruntled by the lack of opportunities and what's been happening here. There are people who have had to lay off staff. There are people who have lost tremendous amounts of business because of the situation with Atlantic and some of the plants in Point Lisas being shut down, things like that impact upon individuals. And so individuals are going to judge the situation now when they hear things like Trinidad is falling apart coming from the Vice President of Guyana, and these are the same people who are now looking to Guyana for opportunities because there are none here for them in Trinidad, then they will tend to agree. Well, and of course, so it's your individual experience that might shape your perception.
Well, Senator,
quite frankly, I am not a person who wants to see us drop to the bottom of the ladder and I'm being very blunt here. I don't want us to be the new Guyana. I grew up in the 80s when Guyana was, seen as really the worst of the worst in the Caribbean. But we have to be realistic. Look at where they are going now. Look at the opportunities. Look at what they are becoming. And I don't certainly want to deepen any rift, and I certainly don't want to see us fall in the eyes and in terms of the rest of the region. But at the same time, I'm realistic, and I know that there are certain things that are happening that probably ought not to be happening and should not be happening, and that we have to correct if we want to maintain our positioning in the Caribbean as a leader, and as a country that has.
So before we lose too much time.
Strength.
Before we lose too much time, there is something else that we wanted to speak about, and ironically, this might also be something of a factor with some of our international relations, at least with America. Our national security, our TTPS, has had links, diplomatic ties, received support from the American embassy, from American agencies. And our crime situation here, we're part of the drug trade. We're seen as a waypoint, not just only as a stop-off for illegal substances. We have a situation with illegal firearms. And overall, we do have a country now that seems to be primed for more crime as the economic situation is not as healthy as it could have been.
And I agree with everything you said. And add to that as well, that another thing that impacts upon our image, both in the region and internationally, is our track record on human rights and how we are treating with it. Yes, we have a crime problem, and we have a crime problem with respect to being a transshipment points for people, guns, and narcotics. But how we treat with illegal immigrants and people citizens coming into this country is also something that's going to affect our image in the region. We had a situation with a Venezuelan baby being shot. Mm-hmm. What has come out of that? Where is the investigation? Has it been swept aside? We had situations where persons have had to petition the court to be able to get out of these situations that they've been left in. Over the last 2 years, because we were trying to manage COVID as well as the influx of people coming in. We've had a number of situations with persons being detained in police stations and attorneys getting involved. These things, they contribute to how people view you internationally, and of course they contribute to crime as well.
Well, Senator, I mean,
it's all interconnected, and I think it's a failure to see the interconnectivity of these issues. And of course, as well, what about tourism? Yes. When every day you are hearing about more guns on our streets, more crimes coming up, how are we going to help restart our tourism sector in the wake of our reopening of our economy?
Senator, I'm glad you bring up tourism, because one of the travel advisories, ironically, in the midst of the pandemic, we were concerned about the travel advisories put against us because of COVID. But the United States Embassy, their travel advisory was still out with regards to areas of the country that had high crime. Now, we could play the blame game all we want. The fact of the matter is crime has been a long-term problem, and this government also seems to not necessarily have the solution, at least right now, as we don't have a commissioner of police, a substantive commissioner of police. It seems as though we're not necessarily going anywhere too quick. I do have to ask, yes, I know the opposition is not necessarily responsible for policy, but maybe, because I brought this up within this week or last week, maybe to preempt the government, will the opposition prepare any sort of solutions they could give to the public so that, we can make specific demands on the government with regards to crime?
Actually the UNC has, electronic communication platform. It's an e-paper, as well as we do a series of webinars and so on. Interestingly enough, we had one on crime quite recently, incorporating the two shadow people for crime, myself and Dr. Munilal, and an attorney who's a criminal practitioner who is non-partisan. And, and that's exactly what we did. And you said crime is a long-term problem. And part of our discussion is actually that crime being a long-term problem also requires long-term solutions. It is not a one-term, 5-year cycle that you can deal with. You have to go beyond that. You have to come up with things that last. It takes a very long period of time, and I keep saying this, and I have put forward several suggestions that I think, and I always break it down to the beginning, middle, and end of the crime problem. The beginning being the things that cause crime to start happening in the first place. So you deal with issues like, let us look at the crimes of passion, the toxic masculinity type problems, the breakdown in family life, children not being in stable homes, being encouraged to join gangs, not having a proper education. What happened to the 2,000 plus children that fell off the grid during COVID? What are we doing about them? Are we simply waiting on them to become, easy targets for gangs because they haven't gotten an education, they have no means of earning an income, they grow up into disgruntled adults or teenagers even, who would be lured into a life of selling drugs and committing crime? Are we tackling that problem? I could talk to you about this from now till Thy Kingdom Come. When we're dealing with detection of crime, you have to be serious about crime detection. You need CCTV, you need DNA, you need those things so that we don't rely heavily on witness statements. And therefore, you can actually, a person will actually think twice about going and robbing a jewelry store on High Street in the middle of the day.
Senator, listen,
we picked up on CCTV very easily.
We don't have that much time left, so I have
you have to look
questions to ask you.
The end of it, the restorative justice aspect. When people go into remand yard and they come out of prison serving their term because you can't keep them there forever, are you simply releasing someone onto the public who is worse than when they went in? There are lots of things, and the opposition has spoken extensively on it. Is it carried in the media? Our solutions, our proposals. I think I heard once something that I talked about DNA making the news. I don't think that is, and I think that I'm blue in the face talking about solutions and possible solutions to crime, but it's not. The focus is not there. The government is spending millions of dollars in legal fees to fight against the granting of bail and all the way up to the Privy Council, but they do not have the resources to invest in enough ankle bracelets to monitor people who are out on bail.
Senator, let me ask you, let me pause you there, because I understand that you are very passionate about the topic, and in all fairness to the media, they have been reporting about this, at least on the part of the opposition. I have seen and read many articles and even online reporting as well. But just in relation to that, you pointed out earlier on the failure to realize the interconnectivity. Now, I don't necessarily think it is a failure to realize. I think it's a failure to act. I think we do realize, and I think the intelligence does exist. I think the problem lies in terms of the action. I mean, I go back to a prime example with the prison break. We will debate how that went about. But what we saw afterwards in terms of the operations between the police service, the prison service, and the defense force was excellent in terms of being able to now, recapture those escaped prisoners. It was excellent. But is it now a failure to act rather than a failure to recognize? And secondly, in terms of fueling the conversation beyond just criticisms, is that in any way really helping a situation? Do you think we can do more besides criticizing? Because criticizing seems to place no pressure on the government. So is there anything else that can be done rather than just criticizing?
And again, I raised the matter publicly as well. When we had the 2015 prison break, there was shortly thereafter, this government came into office. And one of the things that they asked for at the parliamentary level at the Joint Select Committee on National Security was an inquiry. And that inquiry produced a report. And that report was laid in Parliament since 2017. And I asked about how many things. Interestingly enough, the present Minister of National Security was the chairman of that committee. And upgrading infrastructure was one of the recommendations coming out of that report. And I asked the question, well, why hasn't it happened if since 2017? So the opposition cannot find the money to implement recommendations,
Yeah.
but we can highlight the fact that they exist and why aren't they there. There are recommendations. You don't need recommendations from us. Recommendations are all over the place. But we continue to make them and we continue to speak about them. We could only criticize the lack of action and call for action, and we can't do it alone. I would like to hear how many of the business chambers and the media houses and the trade unions and all the other people affected by crime, from Neighborhood Watch and all the people who are custom marching up and down the road quarreling about everything the UNC does, how many of them have read the reports in 2017 laid in the Parliament from the Joint Select Committee of National Security on the 2015 prison break? And how many of them have assessed and asked questions about what has been done from 2017 to now, when we had another breakout of the prison? I haven't heard anything from any of them.
I understand, and again, this is all the time we have for this particular conversation, but if you can, hold on all those thoughts, because we can extend and elaborate a bit more in a week's time. But for now, Senator, thank you very much for joining us once more on the program. Always well to see you. And, again, all the very best. And we look forward to next week's program.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good day.
Take care.
Thank you, Senator.
WESN breaks for news on the hour.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
If the government is afraid to say it, I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy, there will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. Only on your content capital, WESN.
Well, there you go. The good news also faces a bit more of, well, it's not so good anymore. Oil prices have plummeted, and there are pros and cons to that, but not necessarily now will it help in terms of the production, would it?
Plummet is a relative word, so just looking up the reported decrease, it's still looking at to maintain a price of $100 a barrel, give or take. I think the drop was $6, something like that.
Having to release, 180,000 barrels in terms of reserves over the coming months?
Now, we don't know where the price will stabilize. It still might stabilize high because of the uncertainty, and at the end of the day, wars tend to use up a lot of fuel with regards to air transportation as well as the vehicles on the ground. So it might still stabilize high, it might stabilize lower. You know, it's hard to tell because this...
If you're saying stabilize, is causing, if it's high or low, it's fluctuation, which is instability.
No, my point, stabilize as in it will settle.
Yeah.
But we don't know because even with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I use the word war very loosely there based on definition, as much as people will disagree with me, it's not full-on war fighting. The war in Ukraine is also not necessarily full-on armored maneuvers, mechanized units maneuvering and stuff like that, but the uncertainty will lead to more price fluctuation.
Anyway, folks, let's open up the phone lines now, and you can call in and join us on Talking Point 623-9376, 622-9338. We do have a call on the line from Digger Martin. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Shah and Mr. Small.
Good morning.
I want to start this morning by wishing all SCA success, and they should realize what they want if they put in the required or requisite work. But I have to comment on the message that the Minister of Education attempted to portray. 928 students, 5% of the potential SCA students, is left behind. They have been deferred for another year. Why was that? I think it's pathetic that we reach this stage for such a high percentage of students. The ministry should have anticipated that. Whose fault it is? Is it the parents or the ministry fault by not providing the requisite resources for these 920 students? Was the ministry proactive in identifying these potential students? They have been waffling that they're going to be sending out social service people to identify the people who have not logged on. They did do that successfully. I would like a report on those 928, the geographic distribution where they are, and why we reach that stage. So her message didn't tell me that the ministry was basically on the ball. It tells me the ministry was complicit. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Have a nice day, caller.
The one thing I would say you missed out on what you need is the schools. And maybe you meant that in the demographics, but are they private or public schools? If it's private, the ministry doesn't have as much control. They'd still have some influence, yes. If it's public, well then, yes, there is a direct responsibility.
I don't think you necessarily raised bad points, especially over the COVID-19 pandemic and the distribution of devices where social services were to do their checks and then report back to the ministry. So I don't doubt that, and I don't doubt that we will not get a report. My concern concern, caller, is, and the concerns you share are fair. However, this is 5%. What was it like prior to the COVID-19 pandemic?
5%?
Because he said 5%. And the thing, caller, that we also need to bear in mind is that many a times, for whatever reason, and it may not necessarily be down to the Ministry of Education and their incompetence in terms of the distribution of devices and online classes. There are other factors that you have to bear in mind as well as to them not writing the exams. It could be they're simply not prepared, and the ministry has, or the teacher at the end of the day makes that decision in consultation with the principal, the parents, and then that decision is passed on to the ministry. So you have to understand that whilst your commentary and your concerns are fair, please bear in mind that there's so many other factors as well that may not necessarily be directly the fault on the part of the Ministry of Education. But overall, I mean, the message on the part of Dr. Nian Gatsby-Dolly and her, to SEA students today was rather nice. It was inspiring, and it was wonderful to see that. Sean and I commented on that off air. But as I said, putting all that aside, all the very best of luck to students who are currently writing the exam. We do have a call on the line with us from Pity Valley. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean and Keaton.
Good morning.
Keaton, I want to go back on the trend of some good news which you started the program on this morning.
Please do.
I applied for renewal of my son's passport, and I want to give the passport office a shout out. From the time I apply online to my appointment was very efficient. Time I go on for the appointment, the service and the quickness and the staff was very good. And time I turn around, the passport come in my mail in less than a week, I think.
Yeah, that's excellent.
So I don't know if most other public service could operate like that. I want to give the passport office for the efficiency and the upgrade in the computers and the IT stuff a good grade this morning.
Caller,
I want to go. Yeah.
Could you just stay with me, because I'd like to share in the news that I had to renew my driver's license a couple weeks ago, and I made an appointment online. I was able to get a date within a couple weeks from the time I made my appointment online. And I went to the office, and the efficiency and the service that I received was excellent. In no time, I think I was in licensing office and out within half an hour.
Keaton, I was shocked, and I must say, you give kudos where kudos deserve. And every time we tend to criticize things. When something is good, we shout out and give them the kudos.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, caller. Have a good day.
To be fair, we have heard of improvements in certain ministry offices. The media has reported on attempts to improve certain functions like immigration, like licensing. It's not perfect, but at least attempts are being made in these areas. So, and it's bearing fruit now. Can these things be maintained? Is there other factors that we have to consider? Maybe, but until we know those things for sure, for the most part, I think it's a good sign at the very least that things are running smoothly in some areas.
Individuals will have varying experiences, no doubt. And my experience, and the caller from Pity Valley, his experience may not necessarily mean that's your experience.
And years ago, I had a horrible experience with trying to sort out my passport. So to hear that it's improved, I think is a very, very nice bit of news.
Whilst we're still within the COVID-19 pandemic, and though things have opened up a bit, I must admit, I was surprised, I was shocked as to the service and efficiency that I experienced when going to the licensing office in order to renew my driver's license. It was, as I said, within half an hour, I was in and out. And I must say that was great. So thank you very much to the staff for their wonderful service, and to the caller from Pity Valley, thank you very much for sharing that news. We do have another call on the line with us from Shagonas. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I hear you talking about the Tobago ferry and the stop in Togo. I fail to see how a stop in Togo could be economical when you take into account the time you have to go before and the length of time before you could disembark, and all these things. What somebody need to do, when I was in the public service, what you will do is work out the feasibility of this. And it should be available at least to the parliament. How much people would want to leave Tobago and drop in Togo? You ever see the roads coming through Valencia and all those places?
Yes.
Recently? I mentioned it a few things ago. Right? And this is the problem with that. By the way, did you find out anything about my complaint about the Minister of Agriculture when he was Secretary to Cabinet Limited?
Nope.
Do you intend to?
If I have the opportunity and the time, I will certainly do that.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Have a good day, caller. Professor, it's always good to hear from you.
You raised a fair point there, Professor, but I would argue that by having the dock in Togo, you actually have two reasons now in order to improve the road infrastructure particularly, but the infrastructure in general of the area. Because, again, you want more free-flowing traffic, and it might help add more economic ability, development to the area.
You only need one reason to improve the road.
I know, but by having more than one reasons, when you undertake projects that kill two birds with one stone, there's a lot more benefits to be had. The other thing is that, yes, I understand, it's not going to be the boats only going to Togo. The way how I see it working, it would have to be that some boats would have to go to Port of Spain. Here's the thing. That sort of ferry service will primarily be for the people who want to take their cars to Tobago or vice versa, and it will be a lot of more recreational travel. So that's why I'm for it, because it'll save wear and tear and be more economically beneficial on the ferry itself, and by doing that we could keep the ticket costs down. It also keeps the travel time. It'll be a little bit faster, I think, if you drive to Togo and just take an hour.
Honestly, I like the point that you raised in terms of feasibility studies. I mean, it's funny enough, on Tuesday, whilst we were in studio in conversations with one of our directors, that topic was raised. I mean, we hear about feasibility studies that have never been completed, or the most infamous one is the feasibility study in relation to the rapid rail service in Trinidad and Tobago. But before we actually embark on these wonderful ideas into making them reality, do we do our feasibility study? And that's a basic principle and guideline in business.
The irony is, when we restarted flights to England, I'm not entirely sure if we did a feasibility study or if Cal did a feasibility study.
That's exactly the example we were speaking about, the feasibility study. But an idea, if we're doing a feasibility study, an idea that we can also explore is moving the inter-island ferry service from Togo to Tobago. Yes, you spoke about roads and whatnot. It's appalling. It's shameful. But also, if you were to do that and then improve the Port of Spain the Port of Spain terminal, in order to allow for a cargo hub. As I said, it's also an opportunity to stimulate the economy, and we've fallen behind. Forget Jamaica for one moment. We've actually fallen behind to St. Lucia, So bear that in mind as well.
Well, yeah, and the ferry is part of our, you could argue, part of our tourism product indirectly. It's not going to be a major part, but it still adds to it. And it's a major part of our domestic tourism product, because people want to take their cars over, especially when they are there in Tobago for long stays. So, listen, it's an idea to try to make the ferry service a bit more sustainable. Because the problem is these boats are not cheap. And as we have seen what happened when they had to have been replaced, or we had to consider getting new boats a few years ago at the start of the PNM's first term, that was not easy. And to be fair, yes, it was a question of money. It was not just government mismanagement.
Well, we do have some time with us, and we're waiting your calls. Call in and join us in the program, 623-9376, 622-9338. The Water and Sewage Authority, I'd like to go back to the story, something that we did not explore on Tuesday. The cash-strapped Water and Sewage Authority, and according to the Prime Minister, the bankrupt WASA, will now be looking at bringing on private contractors, in order to complete small paving works carried out across the country, that is, well, the fault of WASA. It's been often complained by the public, as well as the Minister of Works and Transport, the conditions that WASA workers leave the roading after completing their duties. And now the company is looking to hire contractors. Now, again, the pro is, okay, finally we're going to get something done about the poor infrastructure on the part of WASA after they've completed their works. The issue with it is that, as the Prime Minister stated, WASA is bankrupt, it's cash-strapped. My concern is, in relation to these private contractors, are we going to hear anything at all about the amount being spent or that is proposed to be spent on these contractors? Are we going to hear anything in terms of the value of the contract? And secondly, I'd like to know, is this an open tender process or is it a selective tender process?
623-936, 622-9338. Call in, interrupt the conversation if you have something to say, but while I have the time, I will just say this. Similar to how we import food, importing food is cheaper than growing food locally. Does that make sense? You know, on the surface, no, because you have to ship the food that's imported, but it's cheaper. I think the contractors, what did we say? They might be more efficient and they might be cheaper than WASA doing it themselves. Maybe, maybe not. We have a caller from Diego Martin. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the ferry from Toco to Tobago. In my opinion, I don't think that's going to be a very wise thing to do. Because of the fact, number one, the trafficking to go up there is going to be big trucks and all those sorts of things. You don't have that kind of land space there for travel on that road like that. It's going to have real congestion. And I can't see them having any improvements or widen those roads. Because there's mountain you have to move, and the other side is precipice. So it means that all this trafficking will be heavy trucks and take goods from Trinidad to Tobago. It would be a real setback, and have serious complaints by those merchants and them.
Well, caller, I'm not sure when the Prime Minister floated the idea, which would have been a while ago. I'm not sure if he also included. Oh, he
floated the idea again.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he included the cargo part of the inter-island ferry service.
Yeah.
So
that's why I'm saying,
that's a whole other category that I actually haven't even thought about.
I am thinking that if that is the case, part of it is going to be a serious problem.
No, and that's fair.
I had a property in Toco, and I tell you something. To traverse back and forth under normal circumstances, I have to be on the road all the time. You have to be careful when you're driving here. And especially with big vehicles like that. If there's the cargo going to be remaining in Port of Spain, it's all well and good. But then I don't think the country could afford that kind of money right now to start with.
Yeah. Now, caller, I'll be honest with you, this is why we're trying to explore the idea a bit more. And I hear you, in relation to the road works as well. But this is why maybe Toco will have to be a passenger hub. Bear in mind, again, we have to explore the issues of the roads and the roadway networks and the conditions. And this is why Port of Spain should probably become the cargo hub, and whether or not you have the barge there that takes across supplies to Tobago, and then also have supplies coming in and going out of Trinidad and Tobago generally.
Well, now, the other thing is that the idea, I think, is, Toco is at the tip. So put it at the tip, right? That's the obvious idea. But does it necessarily have to be at Toco as opposed to being somewhere in the northeast? Because, to be fair, a cargo loading dock on the northeast would also reduce the time of the cargo ferry. And it is a lot faster to drive to the east of Trinidad than for the cargo ferry to actually make it to the northeast waters of Trinidad, much less to reach the Tobago. So, but that's a whole other ball game. So thank you, caller, for bringing up that point, because I honestly didn't consider it.
Have a great day, caller. Thank you very much. And you see, this is excellent. This is why when you call in and make a contribution, it's excellent, because it goes to show that we can critically think and analyze these situations and find some sense of solutions towards it. If we're able to continue these conversations amongst ourselves, hopefully, fingers crossed, somebody within higher office will hear us and explore those ideas as well and put it forward. That is the situation here. Look, look at how we're speaking about a topic. It wasn't even a topic pre-planned, but it was a topic that came up from the discussion of Caribbean Airlines and the inter-island ferry service with regards to moving the at least the passenger hub to Toco or somewhere within northeast of Trinidad, as pointed out by my co-host and colleague. And look at the responses that we've gotten. So this is always why we need to have programs like this within Trinidad and Tobago. And this is where we try our very best not to politicize issues. We try not to have any sense of bacchanal, as they like to call it. By the way, I'd just like to point out that our director in Master Control had to just verify with us the difference between bacchanal and bobble. We were kind of mixing it up.
Oh, there's a difference?
There is a difference.
Wait, sorry. There is a difference when it comes to politics?
There is a difference when it comes to politics as well. But, so we need to have programs like this where we can have open, honest discussions, where we look at facts, where we look at ideas, and we not politicize things too much, because that's the only way we're going to progress.
Well, because here's the thing, right? So the Prime Minister floats the idea twice, because I think he did so before his first term. I could be wrong, but it was a while ago, right? And I just have to ask, well, you're floating an idea. Was it just for elections and then we're not going to bother? Is it that he's having a feasibility study being conducted? Is it that it's just not any budget? Although I would have to ask, was the new airport for Tobago, while tourism is not functioning, something any budget? But let's not harp on that. But it's an idea. It's an idea that has pros and cons. It's something that needs to be explored further. And at the very least, we need the government to tell us what's going on. What have you discovered? What are your thoughts on the idea? Can it be done? Is it just not necessary right now? What is the actual Vision 2030 as opposed to what's being published? Goes back to communication, which is something that we have an issue with. I think you could argue with a lot of areas of the country, not just with the government, but obviously with politicians, it just comes up a lot more obviously.
Anyway, folks, that's where we'll end the call-in segment. Thank you very much to all our callers for their contribution this morning. And that is where we begin the conclusion of our program. Let's just recap what we discussed this morning. We started with some good news in relation to the increase in flights of the air bridge between Trinidad and Tobago and Caribbean Airlines. We're moving from 8 return flights a day to 12 return flights a day, and according to Dion Legault, who's head of communications for Caribbean Airlines, that will extend beyond the Easter period. Furthermore, we also explored the fact that hotel rooms for next year, well, they seem to be for Carnival next year. The demand is soared, and that's excellent news. Some hotels are completely booked for that period next year. We very briefly explored the topic in relation to the Water and Sewerage Authority, and then we welcomed Senator Jayanti Lakshmi with us this morning, where we spoke about CARICOM and whether or not we are deemed or held in high regard within the CARICOM and diplomatically on the international stage, and finally ended it with a conversation on crime. Folks, thank you very much for sharing the good news with us this morning. And as I mentioned before, it's always good to hear from everyone who calls in on the program and adds to the conversation without trying to politicize things too much, and without trying to push one's own rhetoric. It's always good to hear constructive criticisms and analysis as we continue and hopefully find some solutions and progress the narrative. But I'm Keaton Shaw, your co-host for Talking Point, and my co-host, Mr. Sean Michael Small, has been alongside me this morning. Good show, Sean.
Thank you, Keaton. And I'd just like to close out by saying I'm not calling for the whole thing to be overturned and all sorts of aggressive laws to be added and fines, etc. However, I think that accident on the highway involving a family's vehicle that was not even operating, it was on his shoulder, and a truck unfortunately crashed into it. I do think maybe we do need to tweak maybe our highway regulations a little bit to try to prevent these situations. I know if I am on the shoulder of a highway, it's not a comfortable situation. This is a worst case scenario that I hope we don't see repeated again. Accident, bad driving, whatever have you. It is something that we do need to look at just to be sure that we have everything that we could possibly have.
Certainly, indeed. Well, folks, again, all the very best to SA students. I know when you walk out your school later this afternoon and you breathe in that sunshine breathing that fresh air and feel that sunshine on your face, certainly it will be relief. And you have some time off until, of course, SA results are announced. But for now, enjoy that time. All the very best to you. To parents, yes, we extend good luck to you as well, because we know that you may feel a lot of pressure and stress. But folks, that's Talking Point for you. You can join us again once more tomorrow morning for continued discussions.
Parents, when your kids come out, breathe in that sunshine with them. That's the phrase of the day. Breathe in some sunshine, folks.